Imagine walking into a bank and discovering that $250 million had simply vanished, siphoned away into offshore accounts for a project that never existed. No receipts, no concrete, no airport, just a mirage sold with charm, confidence, and a forged identity. Now picture this. The man behind it all wasn't some Wall Street shark or European con artist, but a Nigerian businessman who convinced a prestigious Brazilian bank to invest $242 million in a fake airport. This is not fiction. It happened, and it remains one of the boldest, most audacious scams in financial history. So massive it helped collapse an entire bank, triggered an international investigation, and forced Nigeria to create a brand new anti-corruption agency just to deal with fraudsters like him. The man at the center of this jaw-dropping heist? Emmanuel Nwude, a former banking executive who transformed his insider knowledge into one of the greatest cons the world has ever seen. But how did he do it? And how did a bank filled with seasoned financial experts fall for it? To understand this unbelievable story, we need to first understand the man behind it, Emmanuel Nwude. Nwude wasn't some street hustler or small-time fraudster looking for quick cash. He was, in fact, a respected figure in Nigeria's financial sector. At one point, he even served as a director at Union Bank of Nigeria, meaning he knew the inner workings of the banking system like the back of his hand. He understood how deals were structured, how executives thought, and most importantly, how greed could cloud even the sharpest judgment. Colleagues described him as smart, persuasive, and bold, three traits that, when combined with ambition and a lack of conscience, can be extremely dangerous. Unlike typical scammers who relied on poorly written letters and spam emails, Nwude operated on a completely different level. He thought bigger, aimed higher, and targeted people who were already obsessed with making more money. In the 1990s, while many Nigerians were hustling for survival in a struggling economy, Nwude was plotting a con so massive it would not only shake Brazil's financial world, but also etch his name permanently into the history of global fraud. The scam that would make Emmanuel Nwude infamous began with a single, daring idea: sell something that didn't even exist. In the mid-1990s, Nwude impersonated Paul Ogwuma, the then governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. It was a bold move. He wasn't just pretending to be a wealthy businessman, but one of the most powerful financial figures in the entire country. And with that new identity, he went hunting for a victim. His target, Banco Noroeste, a prestigious Brazilian bank, and specifically, its director, Nelson Sakaguchi. Nwude approached Sakaguchi with what looked like the deal of a lifetime, an exclusive investment opportunity to fund the construction of a brand new international airport in Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. To sweeten the pitch, Nwude promised Sakaguchi a personal $10 million commission if he could convince his bank to back the project. The entire deal was worth $242 million, a staggering sum that would be split between upfront payments and accruing interest between 1995 and 1998. Here's the shocking part: there was no airport, no construction plans, no government project, nothing. It was a complete illusion, a masterstroke of confidence and manipulation. But Nwude knew exactly how to make it believable. He used his insider knowledge from the banking world to draft convincing documents, structure the payments, and answer every doubt with smooth precision. And Sakaguchi, blinded by greed and the promise of personal profit, swallowed the bait whole. Between 1995 and 1998, over $191 million in cash flowed into offshore accounts, with the rest piling up as interest. At the time, it was the third largest bank fraud in history. For Nwude, it was the ultimate payday. For Banco Noroeste, it was the beginning of the end. For years, Emmanuel Nwude's audacious con seemed untouchable. The money had been wired, the accounts had been filled, and Banco Noroeste appeared none the wiser. But like all great scams, cracks eventually began to show. The unraveling began not with Nigerian authorities, but thousands of miles away in Europe. In the late 1990s, Banco Santander, a Spanish banking giant, set its eyes on acquiring Banco Noroeste. Everything seemed on track, until auditors stumbled upon something odd: a mysterious $242 million sitting dormant in the Cayman Islands. That discovery raised a terrifying question: how could a mid-sized Brazilian bank have so much money locked away in offshore accounts, with almost no explanation? When investigators dug deeper, the truth slowly surfaced. The investment wasn't a secret government project at all. It was a fraud, so vast and so unbelievable, it stunned even seasoned regulators. What followed was an international manhunt. Authorities from Brazil, Britain, Nigeria, Switzerland, and the United States joined forces to track the money trail. In Nigeria, the scandal was so big it helped push the government to create a brand new institution, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, to tackle corruption and financial fraud. Meanwhile, Nelson Sakaguchi, the Brazilian banker who had fallen for the con, was arrested at New York's JFK airport. He was later flown to Switzerland to face trial for his role in the disaster. As for Banco Noroeste, the damage was irreversible. The families that owned the bank, the Simonsons and the Cochrans, were forced to pay back the missing $242 million in a desperate attempt to save face. But even that wasn't enough. By 2001, the bank collapsed under the weight of the scandal, and Emmanuel Nwude, his name was now on every investigator's desk. After years of enjoying the spoils of his fraudulent fortune, the hunter had finally become the hunted. By the early 2000s, Emmanuel Nwude could no longer hide behind his web of lies. International investigators had connected the dots, and the EFCC, Nigeria's newly established anti-fraud agency, was closing in. In 2004, the inevitable happened. Nwude, along with several accomplices, was finally arrested. For Nigerians, it was a shocking spectacle. Here was a man who had once moved in elite banking circles, now standing before a federal court accused of orchestrating one of the largest scams the world had ever seen. The trial was long, messy, and filled with twists. Nwude tried every trick in the book: denials, legal delays, and even intimidation tactics. But the evidence was overwhelming. Fake documents, money trails, and testimonies from his accomplices painted a clear picture. This was not a misunderstanding, but a deliberate and calculated fraud. In 2005, the hammer finally fell. Emmanuel Nwude pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. His assets were seized, and millions were returned to Banco Noroeste in a bid to recover the stolen fortune. For the EFCC, it was their first major conviction, a milestone that cemented the agency's reputation in fighting financial crimes. But even prison wasn't the end of Nwude's story. In 2006, barely a year after his sentencing, he was released. And in true scammer fashion, he immediately tried to fight back. Claiming that much of his wealth had been earned before the fraud, Nwude filed lawsuits to reclaim his assets. Incredibly, he managed to recover around $52 million worth of property and funds. Years later, in interviews, Nwude even insisted he had been pressured into pleading guilty, claiming he was innocent of the $242 million airport scam altogether. Whether you believe him or not, one thing is clear: Emmanuel Nwude walked away with his name forever etched into the history books as the man who sold a fake airport and nearly got away with it. The collapse of Banco Noroeste was more than just a financial tragedy. It was a cautionary tale for the entire banking world. For Brazil, the scandal was humiliating. One of its respected financial institutions had been brought down, not by market forces or economic collapse, but by a single man's deception and a banker's greed. The Simonson and Cochran families, who owned Banco Noroeste, were left to carry the burden. They had to repay the full $242 million that had been siphoned away, an amount that devastated their legacy. Despite their efforts, the bank could not survive. By 2001, Banco Noroeste was gone, swallowed by the scandal it could not outlive. For Nigeria, the case became a turning point. The international embarrassment of having one of its own masterminding such a global scam pushed the government to take corruption more seriously. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, created in the wake of the scandal, quickly became the nation's frontline agency against fraud, money laundering, and corruption. And Emmanuel Nwude's conviction marked its very first major victory. As for Nwude's accomplices, the outcomes were mixed. Some confessed and received lighter sentences, others faced years in prison. One associate was sentenced to just over 2 years and forced to return millions. But Nwude, the architect of it all, carried the heaviest punishment, though even then, his later attempts to reclaim seized assets proved he wasn't ready to let go of his fortune so easily. Globally, the case sent shockwaves through the banking system. Regulators tightened their oversight of offshore accounts, and international cooperation between financial authorities grew stronger. The scam highlighted just how vulnerable banks could be not only to hackers or criminals with guns, but to charismatic fraudsters with nothing more than confidence, forged documents, and the ability to exploit greed. In the end, Emmanuel Nwude's story left scars that stretched far beyond Nigeria. It wasn't just about one man's con. It was about how fragile trust can be, and how the hunger for wealth can blind even the most powerful institutions. This was the story of Emmanuel Nwude, the man who sold a fake airport and almost got away with it. But he's not the only one who pulled off scams of this scale. In our next episode, we'll uncover another jaw-dropping con that shook the world. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.